Hi everyone, welcome to Access Prescriptor. Recently, when I taking classes, the people are getting very tough to understand the difference between eccentric contraction and stretching. Many of us still thinking that when I do elbow flexion, biceps for concentrically, triceps goes for eccentric contraction. But this is a wrong understanding actually. What happening actually, triceps get relaxed to promote efficient contraction of the biceps and tension happening in the biceps. That's all happening. But what is the difference between eccentric contraction and stretching? And let me give you more clarity now. Come on, let's get dive into the video. When you want to understand the difference between eccentric contraction, you have to understand what is a movement force or muscular force producing some movement in certain direction, the direction of the movement force, and you have to understand the direction of the resistive force direction. These two things you have to understand to make more clear, to understand this concept more clearly. Now consider I am doing the elbow flexion with 5 kg dumbbell, elbow flexion and extension happening. Everyone knows your biceps work concentrically when I go up. Okay. But going down portion is the key. So we are going to learn eccentric, right? So we have to understand when I go up, movement is happening in this direction. Movement is happening in this direction. Resistive force is happening in a downward direction, both in a opposite direction. When I come up and I go down, movement happening downward direction. Movement is elbow extension. Resistive force also putting in the same direction. Both muscle force and resistive force happening in a same direction. Here, same direction. So the direction we understand now. How can this direction help to understand the concentric and eccentric contraction? Simple. When both muscle force and resistive force happening in opposite direction. When the movement happening elbow flexion or any other movement, both movement force and resistive force in opposite direction. Actually, resistive force resisting that movement in opposite direction. That same movement happening muscle work concentrically. Okay. When I'm coming down, both in the same direction, but my movement happening elbow extension. So elbow extensor has to work here, but not, because my resistive force is not opposite direction of my movement force. It assisting both in the same direction. If the both in the same direction, which movement is happening, that muscle, opposite muscle, antagonist, work eccentrically. Very simple. The resistive force and movement or muscle force happening in the same direction. Expected movement, opposite muscle work eccentrically. If that resistive force or movement or muscle force happening in a different direction, resistive force passing against that movement direction, same movement happening, same muscle work concentrically. Okay, the basic understanding. Now let's look at triceps example. Now going to explain the triceps example. Now see, I want to activate the triceps. My resistive force pulling upward. Movement happening downward. The movement happening downward, resistive force opposite to that movement. So the same movement happening muscle work concentrically. Makes sense. When going up, biceps won't work. Even though elbow flexion happened, biceps won't work because resistive force, movement force in a same direction. Both in a same direction. So elbow flexion is happening. Opposite to the elbow flexion, elbow extensor. Elbow extensor work eccentrically. Elbow extensor work concentrically. Now elbow extensor work eccentrically. Hope it makes sense. Now, this is the eccentric contraction. When the eccentric contraction has to happen, the movement has to have both resistive force and muscle force. But resistive force should not resist the movement. It has to assist the movement in the same direction. And even though it is in the same direction, which movement happening, the opposite muscle work eccentrically, not the same muscle work eccentrically. Okay. Now we'll come to the stretching. See, I'm holding that, I'm doing my bicep stretch. I'm going to do the bicep stretch. This is the assistive force. Now there is no resistive force. This is the assistive force holding and pushing my hand backward to prevent elbow flexion. So when I move up, forward, then the biceps getting stretching. There is no active work happening yet. Stretching is the passive. There is no resistive force. It's an assistive force. So I'm getting stretch, not the eccentric contraction of the biceps. The same way I'm taking assistive force to bring my elbow up. So now I'm feeling the tricep stretch, same tricep stretch. Now there is assistive force and passive. My triceps not actively involving with any force. So it's called stretching. When there is a resistive force happening in the same direction, that is called eccentric contraction. Now hope you understand the difference between the stretching and eccentric contraction. I personally don't like to give this elbow example, but this is the first time making this video about the eccentric contraction stretching. If I make the elbow example or isolated example only, it was easy to understand. Okay, I want you people to don't go for the complex or compound movement like a squat or shoulder press. Just go for leg extension, curl or calf raise, these movements, isolated movement. Decode how concentric, eccentric movements are happening over there. Okay, even though if you know, try to decode some movements, it gives more clarity and understanding about the eccentric type of contraction. And so you decode the movement and drop a comments below. When next time I will come and make a compound movement and I'll decode how concentric, eccentric actions are happening over there. Okay, hope you learned something new. Happy learning.